Shane Gillis, live on stage.
I'm a bit of a history buff, which, by the way, that is early onset Republican.
His biggest tour ever is coming to Des Moines.
You're a white dude in your 20s and 30s, and you're like, I can't stop reading about World War II. It's coming, bro.
See Shane Gillis with his unmistakable comedic style. Live at Wells Fargo Arena Saturday, May 31st. Get tickets now at iowaeventcenter.com. For more, visit ShaneMGillis.com.
Hello and welcome into a Sunday edition of Bigger Than 12. This is going to be the new normal here on Iowa Everywhere during basketball season. I'm Jake Brend, joined by Derek Duke in Texas. It has been a while since our last show. Feels weird, but feels good to be here. Derek, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good as always. Yeah, it does feel like forever. I went out Saturday. I told you guys I went out Saturday to watch my Texans put an ass whooping on the Chargers. Had a good time, a few beers, so a little bit slow this morning, but it always feels good when you have a victory in the playoffs. But before we get there, I also want to give a shout out to my co-host here for winning Iowa Sportscaster of the Year. I don't think we've recorded since then, so I do want to give you a shout out. I know you work your ass off, man, and I want to say congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully my present is you made the random Big 12 basketball player a little easy for today, but I appreciate it.
We'll see. We'll see how it is. I think you guys will get it.
Well, now this Iowa Everywhere team, we've got, I think between me and Keith Murphy, I think we've got 7 Iowa Sportscasters of the year. I've got some catching up to do to Murph, obviously, but I appreciate it, and I thank you to all the listeners that have reached out over the past couple weeks. It truly has meant the world. There's been so many people that have reached out.
Is it like a Heisman Trophy ceremony where you get the trophy and it's like 50 pounds, and do you have it stored in your house somewhere?
There's a convention out in Greensboro in June, and I don't think it's 50 pounds, but there is a bit of a trophy or a plaque, and it'll be a fun networking event that I've heard lots of stories about from Keith and Mark Woodley and John Sears and other winners from the past couple of years, so that'll be a great weekend.
Do you get a painting like the Heisman Trophy winners? They get the paintings in the little hall. You should get a painting. Ask for a painting.
Do I know any painters?
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be cool. Put it right behind the Simpson football helmet.
There you go.
Well, I appreciate it, my friend, and that trip might not be cheap, so I need to go to Wealth Charter, Retirement Planning and Tax. It's the best time of year to go to Wealth Charter. It's January. The only thing to do right now is watch college basketball at night. Spend your day at Wealth Charter to get your finances in check for the year, and before we know it, tax season will be here. They'll get everything in line for you to help simplify your wealth. Of course, that'll simplify your life. You can go to wealthcharterretirement.com to schedule an appointment at their office in Ankeny. Thanks to Tim Hawkins and his team for supporting what we do here on Bigger Than 12 and at Iowa Everywhere. We got a good show for you today. We're going to recap a good Saturday of Big 12 hoops. We're going to talk a little Matt Campbell to the Bears rumors, react to the college football semifinals, and then we'll pick not every game of the week for the Big 12 basketball slate, but we've handpicked a few of the best games, and of course we'll have an Iowa trivia question and a random, now Big 12 basketball player. We're going to shift from a quarterback to a random Big 12 player, and Derek's going to take over the reins on that. Should be a good show today. Let's lead with Iowa State at Texas Tech. The Cyclones go on the road, come back from 13 down, and beat the Red Raiders 85-84 in OT. Initial reaction to this game, Derek?
I think if we're just ranking the wins here for Iowa State on the season, I would probably put the Marquette win or maybe the Baylor win ahead of this one just because where those teams are and where they are ranked now. I think Marquette's still a top 10 team. Baylor's kind of on that back half of the top 25. So, and plus with the way they beat Baylor, obviously just the beat down that they put on them. So pretty damn impressive in my book. But I get the question because of the way Iowa State had to fight in that game against Texas Tech. I mean, that was a 45-minute battle in Lubbock, and maybe that could be the argument for being it the best win because it was such a tough road environment that they had to play in. I mean, to catch the end of that game, if you just watched the last 5 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever of that game, you got your money worth out of that alone because that was just incredible. To go down the full length of the court in 6 seconds, down by 2, get a bucket, and that's tough. And then to have Jefferson knock down a pair of free throws late in that game to take the lead in OT. And then not only that, you come up with the stop in overtime that you need there at the end. Great win. And I said it after the game, Jake, you probably said something that's similar here, but Iowa State won that game because they were the tougher team. And I love the grit of this team. I feel like they're battle-tested. They're ready to go in Big 12 play. We'll kind of talk about some of these other teams struggling in Big 12 play that really haven't played well up to this point, but I feel really good about where Iowa State is right now in the Big 12 title race. And again, just what a win. Just a tough, physical game. Great win for the Cyclones on the road.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a few weeks here, that it's these type of games that Kansas has won for 20 years. When you're ranked third, you've got that small number next to your name. You're even underdogs on the road in a tough place to play. It's a charged environment. You don't play your A game or really anywhere close, but you still end up in a close game at the end and find a way to win. That's what championship level teams do. It's huge, of course, for the Big 12 championship, the regular season race, but it's also big come March and maybe even April. It's these type of games that I think really do prove to me tougher for longer is kind of the phrase that I believe Brent Bloom has been coining from Matt Campbell, and now it's passed on to the Iowa State men's program. They were down 13 in the first half, down 3 with 20 seconds left, down 4 in overtime. Every single time they bounced back. And I'm so impressed by how unfazed Iowa State is whenever those droughts, whenever those runs from the other team come, because it felt like Tech hit 5 different kill shots in this game. And it didn't really matter. Iowa State bounced back every time. And a lot of that comes down to experience. A lot of it comes down to toughness, both physically and mentally. This team is battle-tested. The core 4, the guys who came back, have been together for a year and a half now. And that really shows. And it proves why Iowa State's so dangerous. And to answer the initial question, I do think that this is the best win of the season. I just lean road games first over home games. I think you could make the argument that the Baylor or Marquette games are the most impressive, certainly in the fashion that they did it. But going into environments like Lubbock, going over to Iowa City, I still put those 2 wins as the best wins of the season. But you can't really go wrong.
I think it's fair to say that it is probably the most impressive win. I guess you could say that just because of the way that they had to play and the way that they had to win this game compared to the other ones where, like the Marquette game was close, but the Baylor game obviously was just a blowout. So you look at that, yeah, it's impressive, but I think you learned a lot more about this game here in Lubbock than what you did maybe at home last week against Baylor.
Correct. And it is time to start a campaign. Curtis Jones is not just the 6th man of the year in the Big 12 or nationally, if that award even exists. I don't think it does. It's thrown around a lot. Curtis Jones should be in the Big 12 Player of the Year conversation and a first-team All-American conversation. I don't want to get into an argument today about who Iowa State's best player is. I think that's one of the hardest questions to answer because you take one You take Jones, you take Gilbert, Lipsy, any of those guys away from the team, it's completely different. But what you can't argue that right now, Jones is the leading scorer on the top-ranked team in the conference. He's doing it at 17 points a game on splits of 47 from the field, 39 from 3, and 83 from the free throw line, all in insanely high volume. Crazy impressive. And then there's the not measurable stuff, but it feels like he hits 3 or 4 shots a game that are complete turning points. I think yesterday, Tech hits a 3 to go up 8 with like 15 minutes left in the second half. The crowd's on fire. Iowa State absolutely needs a bucket. Jones comes off a screen, hits a tough 3, back down to 5. It's shots like that he's been hitting really dating back to this point last year, and he is by far in that Big 12 Player of the Year conversation, and I don't think it'd be crazy if I called him the front runner either, in my book.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we talk about a guy that in the Big 12 Player of the Year conversation that you can make an argument for may not even be the best player on his team.
Right.
Because with Iowa State, it truly is. It's a pick your poison kind of thing. But for me, I'm kind of with you here. I think it would be foolish if he wasn't in the Big 12 Player of the Year conversation. He's third in the conference in scoring, over 17 points a game, only behind Javon Small and JT Toppin from Texas Tech, shooting 39% from threes, you mentioned, which is incredible. One of the best in the Big 12. And if you watch him play, how could you say he isn't one of the best players in the conference? So, yeah, Curtis Jones shouldn't only be in the conversation. He probably should be one of the first guys brought up in that conversation, which is kind of weird. Again, when you think about it, because he's also a guy that comes off the bench. So There's a lot of factors. It's such a great story to me, at least. But again, he's got to be, as of this moment right now, obviously we still have a lot of basketball left to play, but definitely should be in the Player of the Year conversation.
The contenders would probably be still Hunter Dickinson, which I don't know, man. Yeah. I know the stats. Whenever I watch Kansas, I never think Dickinson's the best player in the conference.
He doesn't have that wow factor sometimes. He doesn't necessarily jump off your screen like some of the other players do when you're watching basketball.
But he is probably the Jayhawks' most valuable player. There's Javon Small. Keyshawn Gilbert still has to be in the conversation. And it's funny you say JT Toppin is second in the conference in scoring, because I would say Darian Williams would probably be above him as far as Tech goes. But maybe that's just the eye test and the stats are saying something else. What I think is so not underrated about Jones, I don't even know what you call it, but maybe we'll coin it the Kurt Jones effect. So when a basketball game starts, let's say the first 3 minutes, there are 3 different outcomes. The first outcome, Iowa State's playing great. They're up 5, they're up 8. The second outcome, Iowa State's playing okay. It's a 2-point game, it's a tie game. Or the third outcome is, wow, Iowa State is playing horrible. Down 8, down 5. But at the end of all 3 outcomes, Curtis Jones checks into the game, and you're like, well, we're up 8. Good luck. Here comes Kurt. Or, we're not playing that well, but oh, well, here comes Kurt Jones. It's such a cheat code when you're bringing maybe your best player off the bench, and I can't imagine how much of a nightmare it is for other coaching staffs to have to deal with that, because it truly, I think, is the biggest key to Iowa State right now, is that you have so many different ways to beat them. And you got to give a shout out, of course, to Nate Heisey, Branch Hatfield. They come off the bench at the same time as him, and those guys have been game changers too as far as toughness goes. But when you're bringing a guy that's your leading scorer off the bench, it's a really, really big advantage.
He's a spark off the bench that so many teams in the conference wish that they had that kind of player coming off the bench. So it truly is incredible. And you're almost right. It's like a cheat code when he does come on the floor, because you don't see a talent drop off by no means when he's on the court. So It's a great spark. Again, a lot of teams wish they had a player like that. And when you have, it's rare that you have a Big 12 Player of the Year caliber player coming off the bench and playing this, and he's playing lights out. So yeah, he's definitely in that conversation for me.
I want to talk a little bit of Texas Tech before we'll move on to a few other games. I was really impressed by their athleticism, by their talent between their starting five. But I can't imagine how sick that fan base feels today. It was their chance for their first really marquee win of the season, and they had the game won or close to won 3 or 4 different times, and it slipped away every time. But that doesn't necessarily change my opinion on them at all. It just they're still probably a bubble team with where their resume's at. I think come the end of the year, I don't think they'll be close to the bubble. I think they've got 6 or 7 seed written all over them. But this could have been a win that would propel them into the top 25, maybe even a fringe outside Big 12 championship contender conversation. But they'll have their opportunities, and with Toppin, Williams, McMillan, Hawkins, they look like a 5, 6, 7 seed, even if their resume is probably a 10 or 11 seed right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because to me, if it was anybody else but maybe Iowa State, like, they probably win that game just with the way Iowa State played, because there were several
double digits.
Yeah, there were several times during that game where I'm like, me and my wife were watching it at the local brewery we were at, and we're like, okay, this is it. We're like, Texas Tech's going to win this game, and Iowa State just kept fighting back. And if it was anybody else, yeah, you're right, they do probably win by double digits. But I do like this team, and I think I read somewhere that it was going to be the first time in, I think, 3 years they would beat an AP top 3 team, just in general. So it's been a while for them, too, to pull off an upset like that. But this is a team, to me, that's still finding their way. They've been a bit shaky, and it's like they get on a little bit of a roll here, and then they lose a game. But I do like the fight that I see out of this team. They're the second best three-point shooting team in the Big 12, so that's something to keep an eye on. Their defense is capable of playing at a high level, and they're actually in second in points per game offensively in the conference. We've talked about TJ Toppin. He's a dude. I mentioned him earlier, and when it comes to the Big 12 Player of the Year, he's in that conversation, and for me, he's a big difference maker for that Tech team. If this team can stay healthy and keep playing like the way they did on Saturday, this could be one of those Big 12 teams that make a run in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up JT Toppin. His injury, no doubt, changed the game yesterday. And Iowa State did get some breaks. Even though it felt like the majority of the first 38 minutes, not a single bounce went Iowa State's way. But they did catch a break with Toppin leaving the game. He did come back in, but he clearly wasn't the same after he sustained that ankle injury. I'll be interested to see what Tech does the rest of the way. They've got Arizona coming to Lubbock next Saturday. That's a huge game where they could really use a marquee win to get themselves into the top 25. We'll talk KU Cincy in just a second, but first I want to tell you about a huge couple of weeks that our friends at the Iowa Wild are having over at Wells Fargo Arena. They got games on January 17th, 18th, 22nd, 26th, and the 25th. That's a lot of games over the next couple weeks. And on the 25th, the Wild will be hosting the Stars at 6 p.m., featuring a post-game concert from Dylan Scott. The purchase of a ticket gets you not only into the hockey game, but also a ticket for the concert. Lower-level tickets, super, super limited, so be sure to get them today. And then VIP packs, still available. That'll allow you to watch the concert from down on the ice. The Wild do great concerts after games. And to even add to that, it's 2-for-1 Confluence beers.
Oh, there you go.
That got Derek's attention.
That alone should just make you want to buy a ticket.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll be telling you more about all of the promotions that are going on at the Iowa Wild over the next couple weeks. And even two guys and Murph and Andy will be doing giveaways for a pair of lower-level tickets and 2 on-ice passes to watch the concert. They'll have more details this week on two guys and Murph and Andy on how to get in that giveaway and how to maybe even win. Thanks to the Iowa Wild for supporting what we do at Iowa Everywhere. go support them by watching some good hockey and having some fun at Wells Fargo Arena. Kansas, Cincinnati. Wow, what a weird game. 54-40. I usually like to start with winners when we talk on this show, but at this point, I think we got to start with the losers. Why exactly were we so wrong on Cincinnati? And by we, I kind of mean everybody, us, the media, the voters. Feels like everyone was in on Cincinnati. Why were we so wrong?
First of all, let me say yikes to that performance on Saturday against Kansas. That was about as ugly of a game as I can remember. And it's clear to me now that I brought this up a few weeks ago on the show that their non-conference schedule did not help them one bit prepare for Big 12 play. And yeah, it's great to rack up a bunch of wins, but unlike some of these other Big 12 teams, they aren't battle tested and ready to go. Second worst offense in the conference, which is kind of funny because I was worried about their defense playing poorly, but they're actually in the top half of the Big 12 when it comes to defense. So, but again, watching their offense on Saturday made me want to pull my eyes out. 15 points. They scored 15 points in the second half against Kansas. That's completely unacceptable. And they have some decent players, but it's not coming together for them. And I feel like they are missing that spark. Like they could use a Jones off the bench for sure. They're missing that spark offensively. They need somebody to step up on offense badly. And sure, they played a close game against Kansas State and Arizona, but then they lose to Baylor by 20. And then Kansas makes them look silly at home. This team is not ready to compete like I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, that's a tough first 4 games. Say what you want about K-State. Well, don't worry. We'll get into them in just a minute. But going to the octagon of gloom, Kansas, Baylor, Arizona, that's a tough first 4, but I never would have thought 0-4. And I think looking back, without realizing it subconsciously, I kind of thought Cincy was a shoo-in because of all the experience they brought back. But at the same time, that experience missed the tournament last year. So it's not like they were these world beaters a year ago and they're rallying the troops and getting the team back together for another ride. They were deeply flawed last year, and they haven't really fixed those flaws. They're very similar to the first 2 TJ Otzelberger Iowa State teams. They're tough, bunch of junkyard dogs, but they're very offensively challenged. And that, trust me, you don't have to tell me and Aiden, that can lead to some really, really tough stretches. I still remember when Iowa State scored 36 points against Oklahoma State at home and lost. It can be really hard to watch. And the schedule should soften up a little bit. I mean, that last 3 games is brutal, but they're still probably a middle-of-the-pack Big 12 team at best, and they're going to need to rally off a win streak here to get back in that bubble conversation, because you're looking at probably 9 or 10 wins is what you're going to need to get on the bubble, and I don't know. Their offense is going to have to come a long way to get to that point.
For sure.
Let's talk about KU. Have they turned a corner? Or is it too soon?
I want to say yes. After that loss to West Virginia, Kansas has now won 3 straight conference games. They put up almost 100 on UCF the other night, beat Arizona State by 20, and then held Cincy to 40 points on Saturday. Now, offensively, they weren't great on Saturday, but when you play defense like that, it does not matter. Hunter Dickinson looks great. He's another guy in that Big 12 Player of the Year conversation. And Zeke Mayo playing outstanding right now as well. That duo offensively is probably one of the best in the conference. Defensively, as I mentioned, they're playing probably just about as well as anyone. They're a top 3 defense in the conference. But it's going to come down to how they play offensively on that side of the ball. I'm not saying they have to put up 80 points per night, but I would like to see a little bit more consistency there. And I would be willing to buy in even more if they do start showing that. But at the end of the day, it's just weird. It's still Kansas, and we are not used to seeing this program still figuring things out this late in the year. But they still are a work in progress, and who knows by the time the tournament gets here, the conference tournament gets here, what they're going to look like. But I like the progressions that I'm seeing from this Kansas team right now.
It's definitely a product of the new era, where the Kansas of old, you're having Frank Mason, Wayne Selden, Perry Ellis. You're having these guys for 4 years, so you know exactly what to expect every January when conference play rolls around. But as you saw this offseason, they went out and essentially bought themselves a second starting five. And it takes a while to gel, and that's why I'm not ready to say that they've completely turned the corner. Sure, their 50-point win over UCF was very impressive. I'd be an idiot to say that's not. But that first half against Arizona State was a struggle. And KU Twitter, which is probably not the best measuring stick for, or maybe the best pulse for where our program's at, they were melting down. And if we're being honest, to beat Cincy on the road when they only score 40 points should not be too much of a challenge. The problems that I've had with KU all year still are not fixed. The lack of shooting. They're just 26.5% from three in conference games. That's almost last. I think it's 15th. They went 2 of 21 against Cincinnati. They aren't getting the line at all. They're dead last in the conference at free throw rate. And I still think KJ Adams is getting too many minutes. I know Bill's experimented a little bit with switching that around, but they still just feel clunky no matter how good Mayo and Dickinson have been. We will learn so much about them on Wednesday night. If they go into Hilton and win or keep it within a 3, 4, 5 point game, I'll be ready to say that KU has turned the corner. But until then, I'm not ready to say that. And it's weird because no matter my answer to this question, I still think they're good enough to win a national championship. I think they're definitely good enough to make a Final Four run because it's Bill Self, because they've got the talent. There's no question there. Look how much their roster costs. It's just a matter of, are they going to be ready for the upper tier Big 12 road games? And I don't know yet.
Yeah, I'm still 1 foot in, 1 foot out on this Kansas team. And you're right. That game on I guess, Iowa State and Hilton is going to show and prove, I guess, a lot about this Kansas team and just how good we think they are or how good they can be. So, again, if they get the crap beat out of them, then I might be kind of on the other side. But, again, if they pull off an upset win, that would be really huge for that Kansas team.
We got some more notes on just a few other teams. We'll kind of fly through these. Nothing too substantial from these games. Houston blows out K-State by 30. Houston's looked great, even though they haven't played a world beater schedule yet. But no matter what schedule they've played, they've won their 4 Big 12 games by an average of 25 points. Their conference only 3-point shooting is number 1 in the Big 12. I wonder how sustainable that is. I'm ready for them to get challenged, but I don't know if they will until they head to Lawrence on January 25th. I think they'll pretty certainly be 7-0 heading to KU in a couple weeks. Anything stick out necessarily about Houston so far? Just status quo.
Just kicking the crap out of Kansas State, and as you mentioned, they've gotten off to a great start in conference play. Their schedule, obviously, is going to pick up soon, but what they are doing is impressive, I have to admit. LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp, 2 really solid players, and I will say I'm going to be interested to see how this team plays down the stretch because I just don't feel – personally, I don't feel about as confident about this Houston team as maybe some other people do right now. But, again, we'll see a lot more. But I think a lot of that game spoke to about just Kansas State's problems more maybe than about how good Houston really is for me right now.
And a lot of tangible stuff. How do you leave Emmanuel Sharp open? Did they watch any film the entire week? I'm appalled by how bad Kansas State is. And I don't think their season is salvageable. I know it looked like they might have maybe turned a corner with that win over Cincinnati. It has been a train wreck since. And this can be a conversation for a couple weeks down the road that we can spend more time on it. But there has to be a serious Jerome Tang conversation because it has been a disaster last calendar year for him.
I think some Kansas State fans are already having that conversation as we speak because people are really pissed off about the way he's handled this team right now because it's just bad. And it's just crazy to see the decline of this program over the last 2 seasons.
Couldn't have happened to a better guy. We'll just leave it there.
You had to throw that one out there.
So he comes from Baylor, and they had a doozy out in Tempe last night. I watched this entire game until about 6 minutes left. I had to go down to the studio for Local 5 News at 10. Baylor up, I think, 12, something like that. Not playing incredible, but probably winning pretty easily. I checked the score with a minute left. They're only up 4. Go back and rewatch. Total collapse to let Arizona State get that game to overtime. Luckily for Baylor, they dominated overtime. But I'm in a really weird spot with Baylor right now. I don't know how to put it into words. What did you think about their bizarre trip out west?
They got lucky. I mean, they had a 15-point lead at one time in that game, and to nearly lose that is it's wild. But I will say that I know that the Bears were a little bit shorthanded on Saturday, but forward Josh Ojowana, he picked a great time to have one of his best games of his career. 12 points, had 17 rebounds on the night. Omir was great. He had 19 points in that one, and VJ did too. So it was weird to see them give up over 40 points in the second half to a team like Arizona State. And much like some of the other teams in the Big 12, Baylor is one of those teams that you're going to have to see play well, and then they're going to have one of those head-scratching games like you saw on Saturday. And, Jake, I know you have said this before, but this program really hasn't been as consistent as they were when they once won that national title. I feel like they've kind of just been on this rocky road ever since they won that title a few years back.
I really don't know if it's been the NIL, where we all know that Baylor's got money. Are they targeting more flashy names? Are they targeting the higher price? Because the team that won the national championship, there was nothing flashy about those teams. Those guys were just straight up dogs. You got Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell. It feels like so long since they've had those type of guys, and now they're relying on these smaller offensive-driven guards like Jeremy Roach and Jalen Nunn, and I just need more out of those guys. Those are the veteran guards. You're getting enough out of Norchad Omier. VJ Edgecombe's put together a really, really good stretch, but he's still a freshman. You need Roach and Nunn to step up and elevate Baylor to, or even close to the level that we've seen them at really the last decade, because they're not there right now. And it's bizarre to see. I even go back to that game against Iowa State last week. They didn't look like they belonged on the same floor, and I know they had injuries, but we're not accustomed to seeing a Scott Drew team like that.
No, I think the same could be said for Bill Self and his team right now. We're just not used to seeing some of these programs struggle the way they are and how they have been lately. So it's going to take some getting used to. But for Baylor and Kansas, I think they still have a chance to rack up some wins, be in that Big 12 title conversation. Unlike some another team like Kansas State, who you said you don't think their season is salvageable at this point.
And then Arizona, they take care of UCF. UCF, they made this game interesting a few different times. Arizona was up 15 early, and UCF came back and tied it right before halftime. Arizona able to pull away. Really impressive start to the conference season. They're 4-0. I think they've cemented themselves as a Tier 2 contender. If for whatever reason there was a disaster stretch by an Iowa State and a Houston, I think they're right there in that conversation with Kansas or maybe even Texas Tech as the team that could come up and maybe play spoiler. They've been elite almost at the top of the conference in every conference-only offensive stat, and they have maybe their biggest two-game stretch of the year coming up this week, with Baylor coming to town and then going to Tech on Saturday. I'll be really interested to see what they do in that two-game stretch, because if they go 2-0 in there, we're talking maybe Tier 1 contender territory for them.
Absolutely. I want to see a little bit more from them, but I think I can be persuaded into them being a contender right now. They've won 6 straight after that loss to UCLA, and by far their best win in Big 12 play has come against West Virginia on the road, which they won that game by 20, so that was really impressive. Arizona's offense been playing great, third best scoring offense in the Big 12. A lot of that goes to Caleb Love, who's having a great year, averaging nearly 16 a game. And boy, he had himself a night on Saturday behind the arc. And as great as their offense is, though, I will say this, my main concern kind of goes to the defensive side for them. Now, they have been getting better defensively, but much like Kansas on offense, like they're still a work in progress too. So for me, I just need to see more from that end of the floor, but I wouldn't be shocked to see this Arizona team in the mix for a Big 12 title late in the season. And you're right, we're going to find out a lot about this team this week.
Iowa State goes to Arizona at the end of the month. They play Arizona State and Arizona. I know there's quite a bit of Cyclone fans making the trip down. I would advise you to fly. Don't drive, but I know there's some sickos out there that might drive. And if you're driving from Iowa to Arizona, the absolute number one thing you need to do before you go is hit up our friends at Freedom Tire locations in Ames, Altoona. You can go to Fleur Drive in Des Moines, West Des Moines, Hickman, in Urbandale. They'll get your car ready for the road. If you need new tires, they'll change your tires. If you need an oil change, they'll do it all. Quentin Crowner and his team, great customer service and great at what they do. Thanks to Freedom Tire for supporting everything that we do here on Iowa Everywhere. They're locally owned, just like us. Aiden Wyatt coming on in with the Iowa trivia question before we talk a little bit of football.
All right, Derek. Lock in.
I'm on a two. I think I'm on a two little win streak of 2 here. If I had to go back, it's been a while, but I'm ready to make it 3.
What is the name of the bike ride in Iowa?
Oh gosh. First of all, I'm not a guy that rides bikes. I can do about 12 miles on a bike, and that's probably my limit. So if it's any longer than that, I'd have no interest in that.
It's a little bit
wee
longer.
bit longer than
A
that.
wee bit longer than that? Yeah. I don't have the knees for it. Does it involve beer drinking somehow? Is it like
Oh, yeah.
drinking? Is it like one of those
Yes,
things where
but
you...
that doesn't have anything to do with the name.
Ah, damn. I have no idea.
RAGBRAI.
A what?
It's called RAGBRAI, so it's an acronym for the Register... I don't know.
Register's annual Great Bicycle Ride across Iowa. So it starts on one side of the state and goes all the way to the other.
So you dip your back tire into the Missouri River, and then you ride your bike across the state, and then dip your front tire in the Mississippi River.
Okay, so you're going from west to east.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a lot of people that do the entire thing. You have people coming from across the country to do it because it is such a famous bike ride. But you also have tons of people that will just go do it for one day. And there's 5 overnight stops. And when a town is an overnight stop, it becomes a huge event. It's come through my hometown a couple times. The city shuts down. You'll have, I want to say, when my hometown of Indianola hosted it back in 2019, they estimated that there was 100,000 people in Indianola at one point, and it's a 15,000 person town. So it's a huge deal.
How far is the actual bike ride? Did he say how far the bike ride is from one end of the state to the other?
So it depends on the year because they change the route. Like some years they'll start in Sioux City and go across and end in Clinton. But I don't know. And how long would you estimate Iowa is from,
I have zero
from west
idea.
to east? Probably 500 miles. Is that
Would anybody like to try that, to go from like El Paso to Houston on a bike?
So I don't know why, but the 2022 map came up and it was 462 miles.
Yeah, 462.
So about mile 12 to 15 range, I'm calling the ambulance. Or somebody,
Yeah.
actually, I wouldn't even be able to call the ambulance. Somebody would just see me on the ground, and then they would have to call the ambulance to come get me. Like, oh yeah, he made it, 1% of the way? Not even 1%?
I'm not much of a biker myself, so I've never done it. I've been at plenty of stops over the years, but
You're not wearing the tight biker suits. They always wear those nut
not
huggers.
really.
I feel like they always wear those like body nut hugger suits and the little hats.
Well, and then these bikers, they wake up, they'll bike from Ames to Ottumwa. It's like a 70-mile bike ride. And then they'll just get hammered that night. And then the next day they'll wake up. It'll be 95 degrees in the middle of July. And then they'll ride from Ottumwa to Burlington, and it's another 75 miles, and they'll just be hungover, get hammered again. Some of them. The partiers.
Awful. That sounds awful.
The partiers. There's some that are just like, I'm going to bike all the way across the state. I'll stick to running. I don't know if I could ever do the full rag bri.
That's crazy.
Speaking of west to east, there's been some rumors of a little Matt Campbell interviewing for the Chicago Bears. We'll see what happens. How seriously are you taking, maybe not rumors is the right word, how seriously are you taking these conversations of Campbell to the NFL?
I would take them about as seriously as if I told somebody I was going to do that bike ride across Iowa, because it's not going to happen. I mean, out of all the franchises in the NFL, why the Bears? Like, I get it. They're a historic team, but their front office is worse run than your local Burger King. I mean, Matt Campbell was born to coach college football, and with the way he operates, he's a guy who takes boys and turns them into men. Like, he molds people. And I don't feel like you can really do that in an NFL locker room, because it's a locker room of men. And there's some coaches that find out the hard way, like Nick Saban did, for example, when he went to Miami all those years ago. You have men in their mid to late 20s, some in their 30s, and you're basically kind of babysitting them in a sense. So it's easier said than done. And I know Campbell's had some rumors with the Jets a few years back, and I'm sure it was very flattering for him. But the Jets aren't run any better than Chicago. So for me to see Matt Campbell leave, it better be a dream job or the right fit for him. And I don't see Chicago being the right fit for him at all. Again, it's a great historic franchise, but they are just run so poorly. And me and you and Aiden were talking about before the show kind of maybe where he could fit. And you brought up Pittsburgh for an example. I think that would be a perfect place for like a coach like Matt Campbell to go to. Unfortunately, I just don't think that job is going to be open for him.
My concern meter for Campbell leaving is 0.5 out of 10. It's minimal. And does that mean that these are fake reports that he's going to interview? Absolutely not. I would imagine he does interview, and I think he'd be crazy to not. Because a job interview is a chance to sharpen your skills. It's a chance to network, and it's a chance to see where you stand. Now, are the Bears going to offer him? We have no idea. Would Campbell accept if the Bears offer him? We don't know. We're not in Matt Campbell's head. What I do know is that we're on year 9 of Matt Campbell, and he's still in Ames. Eventually, you just kind of get used to these off seasons where they overachieve and have a great season, that bigger jobs, bigger opportunities come calling. Do we know how much Campbell has flirted with those? No. But there is a reason why some stuff gets leaked, some stuff doesn't. So that where there's smoke, there's certainly fire. But I think you're crazy to think that Matt Campbell is looking for a way out of Ames. I don't think that this is at all what it is. I think it's an NFL front office looking at still a pretty young coach. I don't think it's fair to call him an up-and-comer anymore because he has been established for so long, but it's an NFL front office calling one of the best coaches in college football, and that's what I think it is. I don't think they'll offer him the job. They're interviewing a lot of people, but that's kind of where I land on it. And do I think Campbell will be in Ames for 25 years? I'd probably lean no, but at the same time, it wouldn't stun me if he was. He's already made it 9 in a place that Kirk Herbstreit said after 1 year, he's gone. Not like, oh, Iowa State fans, you better hope you keep him. It's going to be tough to keep him. Or, man, if I was Campbell, I would definitely consider taking that Tennessee or Florida State job. No, Kirk said, he gone. Well, Kirk, he's not gone. He is still in Ames 9 years later, and he's accomplished what no other coach at Iowa State has ever done.
Kirk's been wrong about a lot of things lately. I'm just happy that, when we'll talk about Kirk when he starts running his own Twitter account. Apparently his son's been running it for him, or he claims.
His son said that Campbell was gone. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and then his son was the one that went on that podcast last week and was talking about how great it would be to have Michigan and Alabama be in the playoff and all these other sorts of things. But forget about that for a second. I just want to say one more thing on the Campbell thing to the Bears here, just him getting tied to the NFL. I wrote an article last week about it. Just talking about the traditions of Iowa State. Obviously, you have, Juicy Wiggle, people drinking now Ames Lager outside the parking lots, and Mr. Brightside in the stadium now, which I'm still not a fan of, but it is what it is. But I feel like the other tradition now is just going to be Matt Campbell getting linked to every job possible now. Just doesn't even matter where it is. Matt Campbell is going to be a candidate for that job.
And it's a good thing.
Yeah,
it's a good thing when other people, when other teams, other organizations want your coach, because it means your coach is doing something right. It's a lot better to be in that spot than, man, how are we going to get rid of this guy?
Neil Brown.
It's got a big buyout. Yeah. It's better to be where Iowa State is than West Virginia. There's no doubt about that. Sticking on football for a few minutes. Two really good semifinal games in the college football playoff. Notre Dame wins an instant classic over Penn State, and Ohio State outlasts Texas. So Notre Dame and Ohio State will play for the national championship. What conference are those two teams in? It's a Sunday morning. My brain's not really working yet. Still need to go to church.
Well,
could you just remind me?
Notre Dame should be in a conference, but they're too much of a coward to actually join a conference, and then Ohio State's in the Big Ten. So I think we're missing a big one.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's not in the SEC?
Nope. Ohio State isn't either.
Oh, my gosh. Are they still going to play the game? Is it going to be televised?
I think Greg Sankey is probably going to try to get this game canceled, if possible. I don't know yet, but there are rumors floating around.
I would fully support that. I can't believe they're allowing this sport to continue without an SEC team in the national championship.
It's so funny to me because obviously, we'll give credit to where credit is due here. The SEC had a historical run from like 2006 to 2022.
Yep.
They won so many titles. A lot of those were consecutive titles, but this is the second year in a row where we have no SEC team in the Big 12, in the national championship game. Paul Feinbaum and Lane Kiffin have just disappeared off of X, so you don't see them anymore. But for me, it's really all about, and I wrote about it too, is just when will the national media stop kissing the ass of the SEC now? Because I just mentioned this is the second year in a row where you don't have an SEC team in the national title game. And for Texas to go into that conference year one and end up being the final team, I know they didn't win the SEC, but they were probably they were definitely a top two team in the SEC, whether you like it or not. So for them to go right into that conference and win the way they did was pretty telling to me about just how maybe the SEC isn't as strong as some people think. But again, we're just going to have this national narrative that the SEC is just so much better than everybody else. Yeah, and sure, maybe they are when it comes to hypothetical matchups. But again, when it comes to results on the field, the last two seasons, they have not played up to expectations. So, and I think just in general, they're going to have a problem moving forward. And you brought this up, Jake, before too, just with the depth that some of these teams don't have, like the way they used to have it. And when you look at the overall picture of the SEC, I guess big picture here, what team in the SEC, like today, going into next season, what team in that conference really scares you? Georgia just had their starting quarterback leave for Miami for money, and obviously his girlfriend. But still, you have your starting quarterback from an SEC team who won the SEC won the conference and leaves. There's no more, Alabama is not the same without Nick Saban. Brian Kelly is running LSU into the ground. Oklahoma is a shell of itself. Texas is still good, but not great, obviously. So for me, I don't see any. And look at Tennessee. Like, they were one of the best teams. They got absolutely blown out by Ohio State. I don't see a team that scares me anymore. Like, I don't see that Alabama team or that Georgia team that I'm like, boy, I wish I didn't have to play them. Like, now it's kind of like, just bring it on.
I do think Texas will be the class of the SEC for years to come. Not win it every single year, not win 3 straight national championships, but I do think from a talent development perspective, they're set up the best. If Georgia, if they can get back to having even 2 or 3 skill guys that can take over games, like a Brock Bowers, a Ladd McConkey, Georgia will win another national championship. But the last 2 Georgia teams just, or especially this one, just haven't really been as good as those past few teams. And I do think a lot of it comes down to what you mentioned, the lack of depth. When you have a freshman that's a 4 or 5 star that would normally wait until he's a junior to get his shot to play, when those guys are transferring elsewhere to go play immediately, it's just going to even out and level out the entire playing field across the country. And I think we saw that. There's a reason Arizona State went toe-to-toe with Texas. A lot of that came down to one guy, but
And one bad call.
Yeah. This imaginary gap that we have been gaslit into believing there is just not there. The SEC, I think, is still probably, maybe it's the Big Ten. You could really go with either, and I wouldn't be mad. It's still probably the best league. That's never been the argument that I've had a problem with. It's just the narrative that they're so far above everybody else when that's not true. It's not. And the national champion's going to come out of the Midwest once again, and that's good. I think that's really good for the future of the sport, and I hope to God it happens again next year. Because the more that we can put this narrative to bed, I think the better the sport will be for the future.
And also, I don't think people realize that Georgia is really playing 2 opponents. They play they play opponents during the season, and then during the off season, they're battling the local PD, the Athens PD department. So
not an easy job for Mr. Kirby.
All right, let's get out of the SEC talk here. You want to do random Big 12 basketball player?
Let's do it. Actually, oh wait, never mind. We'll have a show before the national championship. I was going to ask who you thought's going to win it, but we'll talk about that a little bit next week. Let's do a random Big 12 basketball player. If you've been around on this show, we did a random Big 12 quarterback throughout football season. Aiden would give us 3 clues. We'd have to guess who it was. Well, we're going to flip it. Derek is going to come up with the random Big 12 basketball player. He's going to give us 3 clues, and Aiden and I are going to compete. I'm excited for this. This could go so many different ways.
I'd be so bad at this. I might be worse at this than maybe the Iowa trivia, but it's probably best if Aiden's on here instead of me. But all right, guys, since you 2 are babies, I'm going to select players who have played in the Big 12 in the last 10 years. So I'm going to kind of shorten that window for you 2 guys. All right, this forward started his career at an SEC school and spent 4 years there before transferring to a Big 12 school for his final year of college.
Deontay Johnson.
He just got it. I'm serious. He just got that. Wow.
Welcome to the show, Aiden.
Yeah. Kansas State's Keontae Johnson.
What was going to be the last clue?
I was going to put in his final year, he was top 5 in scoring in the Big 12, but second on his team in scoring.
Behind Marquise Noel.
And he helped his team make a deep postseason run in a year where no Big 12 team reached the Final Four.
Great hints, Derek. Great hints.
Wow.
I
Great
said
work, Aiden.
You're natural.
I said one thing, and it was just like he already knew it. And I promise I didn't cheat. I did not tell him the answer before the show.
He was the only player I could think of that spent 4 years at an SEC school and 1 year at a Big 12 school in the last 10 years.
I mean, it was a clue.
I might have got lucky, but
I didn't think it was that good of a clue.
No, that was impressive.
Okay.
I think I probably could have gotten that, but definitely not as quick as Aiden just did.
Jeez. I know. Well, I was trying to, make it interesting to where you guys had to think about it a little bit, but I didn't know Aiden was just going to, shoot it right from the hip there and just get it. So I guess I'll have to come up with a better one next week.
No, it was fun. Good work, Aiden.
That was really good. That was impressive.
So just like football season, we're going to pick a few games throughout the week. But unlike football season, we're not picking every game because we're not going to have a 2-hour podcast. That might be fun. Maybe one day we will. But I just picked out what I thought were the 3 most intriguing games in this early week slate, Monday through Wednesday. And I'm going based off of Ken Palm spreads because Vegas won't come out with them until typically the day of. So I got 3 for you. We'll start with Baylor at Arizona. Tuesday night at 10 o'clock on ESPN. I'll be locked in. Arizona's favored by roughly 3.5.
Yeah, I like the way Arizona's been playing. Obviously, we've talked about them earlier in the show, and Baylor's, to me, still very much inconsistent. I think these teams are, I don't want to say going in 2 different directions. I think at this point, I just trust Arizona, especially at home, and I don't know about Baylor playing on the road. I don't know if they're quite ready for that environment. And with the spread, I think I'm going to take Arizona to cover here. Again, I like Baylor. I think they have times where they can be really good, but there's also, we saw what they did in Ames last week. So again, I just don't trust Baylor in this spot, so I'm going to go Arizona here.
Give me Baylor. This will be another road test for them, and they are pretty seasoned so far. I think that does help their cause. Arizona has been really good. There's no doubt. But this is their biggest test yet. Baylor's already been in Arizona. They probably would have got there Friday. Should be used to the time change, even for this late tip. I like Baylor in a slight upset. I'll just swallow the 3.5 points.
Okay.
Next game, I'll be in the house. I can't wait. Kansas at Iowa State, one of the best rivalries in the Big 12. Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. For some reason, it's over on ESPN2.
Gross.
Iowa State favored by roughly 6.5 points.
Yeah, that one should be on ESPN, but we'll just leave that there. I just don't trust. I want to pick Kansas here to cover the spread. Let me get this right off my chest here. Iowa State's going to win this game. I have no doubt about that. I just, with this spread here at 7.5, I just don't trust Kansas offense, especially at Hilton. I just don't think they're going to produce like the way that they're probably going to want to. Iowa State's defense is still really good. That environment's going to be rocking. So I think I'm going to take the Clones to cover here in this game.
I'm going to do the same. We've seen a lot of Hilton Avalanches really make these games blowouts against Kansas. Like typically, this game is either Kansas comes in and finds a way to win by 6 or 7 and pull away late because they're the more talented team, or Iowa State up by 5 most of the game and have a late run to make it a 15-point type win. That's what I see happening because I do think Iowa State is the better team. And even without students, I think this place will still be absolutely on fire for what will probably be the number 2 ranked Cyclones for the first time ever.
You don't want to go into Hilton still trying to figure things out, especially offensively. You don't want to do that, and that's why I just don't think Kansas is ready for this environment coming up. I don't trust them here in this spot.
And we'll close out West Virginia going to Houston, 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. Houston favored by 12.5 points. It's a lot.
Yeah, this to me was probably the trickiest one to pick. I like Houston. They shoot the 3 really, really well, especially at home, but that's a lot of points to leave on the table. I think I got to go with West Virginia, and I know they're still they're having a rocky season. They have a little bit of injury problems as well, but that's just too many damn points for me to leave on the table. I'm going to take the Mountaineers to cover. I think Houston's going to win that game, but I'm going to take West Virginia to cover.
I'm going to go with what history's told me, and it's that Houston is really, really good at home against inferior opponents. They typically blow almost everybody out. I think that's what we get. Blowout's probably not the right word. I don't think we get like an embarrassing loss for West Virginia, but I think this is a game where Houston's up double digits. most of the way and ends up winning by 15 or 16 points, and their undefeated start to conference play continues, and their winning margin continues to be super impressive. That's my prediction. So we're riding on one, and then we're going head to head on a couple others. That's good for content. We'll have to see how we do.
I don't know. I think West Virginia can maybe do a backdoor cover there late. I know Houston's going to win. I do agree with you.
That's the worst part about basketball. Oh, man. The backdoor covers.
Oh, yeah.
Or the free throws.
Yep.
You never know. Like, is a team that's down 11 going to concede the game with 15 seconds left, or are they going to foul until they can't do it anymore? It makes betting basketball really tough. It's why I don't really indulge as much as
the bad beats.
Sports.
The bad beats in basketball are just always epic compared to. I know football ones are great too, but the basketball ones, it happens way more often than what people think.
Well, that's our real first heavy Big 12 basketball show. Thought it went well. Thanks for everyone that tuned in. We got a huge week coming up. We'll have a lot to talk about with road games for Iowa State at West Virginia next Saturday. We'll react to the whole week of Big 12 basketball at the same time on next Sunday. We hope that you join us, and we hope that you enjoyed this show from the Channel Seed Studios. It's been Bigger Than 12 on Iowa Everywhere. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe to anywhere you get your podcasts.